Hello, everybody. This is Up and Atom Comics, and I thought I would do a little bit of a video to talk, give my thoughts and perspective a little bit about another YouTuber's video, Chonko. Chonko Comics and Nerd Culture last week did kind of a thought-provoking video that I wanted to kind of chime in a little bit to kind of carry on the discussion and give some of my thoughts. I was going to do a like a comment to him uh and then it was getting to be too long in my thoughts, and so I thought it'd be good to do a video about that. And I also, because of that, it sparked some interest. And Mike, who runs Tronco Comics, he really does a great job in um, kind of talking through, some topics that some people don't necessarily like, but it's his opinions about things, and it's thought provoking, and so I appreciate that from him. Um, and so he did a video, and I'll get into that a little bit later, just about why he thinks Marvel is maybe dying. And so I thought I'd talk about that. Um, I also and then I have a whole bunch of books that I haven't really shown on my show, um, of acquisitions that I thought would be fun to go through, just to kind of share some of the stuff that I've been picking up too. Um, okay, so before we get started with that, I do want to highlight the CBC Awards that is held. It's on cbcawards.com. I will also put a link below. These are comic book community awards, so people that are involved in this comic book YouTube, um, to kind of highlight there are amazing trophies for this. I was extremely honored to receive an award. I was a finalist in three categories last year. In some of the new categories, which I know is maybe not as many people competing in that like lower tier, but I was honored to be a part of that, and then actually won an award for favorite community artist, which was amazing. A lot. I don't do a lot of highlighting of my art um, on my videos for my channel, and I know some people wish I would do some more of that. And part, a lot of what I've been doing is doing kind of cover recreations, homages, but putting different YouTube members into community members into those covers. That might be something I'm listening to, paying attention, finding a character that they really like. In JSS's example, it was kind of like the first comic that he ever owned. And trying to do some stuff so it's a little bit more personal, meaningful to them, maybe gives them a chuckle to imagine themselves in a comic. But I do those, but I don't really like post the process, and I don't post a lot of that kind of stuff. I don't really record while I'm drawing usually. Um, but I do all of those as surprises for people. So I don't, I kind of like to, surprise some people with some things that they're not expecting. They just get something in the mail one day. They're like, "What is this?" And then they open it up, and it's kind of like Christmas in a way. It's like a gift from somebody you weren't expecting anything, and then it's cool. And it's kind of like I don't, in most cases, like I don't want them to know, because I'd I'd like them to know, like, hey, I'm thinking about them, and I notice what they're doing. I appreciate who they are as a person, and so I kind of like to send some things out that way to kind of do that. So, but so I did win that award last year. It was such a wonder. I know a lot of people. Um, really get into this and care about it. And I did do my nominations. And if you go to the cbcawards.com page, they changed up a little bit with how they are doing the nomination form. So before it used to be like break it into categories. They have tiers, like less than 500 subscribers and things like that. They new, uh, over 2000 or whatever they had for different tiers. And you kind of had to look into it to see where was this person when this thing went live with how many subscribers that they had. And I think Brian LCS, who's kind of the main person behind this event and these awards, he he got some feedback and he kind of adjusts some things from year to year. And one thing that he found was like a lot of people don't nominate somebody for every category, when they're going through their nominations. But he also wanted to take a little of the homework out, which is very generous, to take the homework out of the people that are doing the nominations and kind of taking on the workload himself to figure out like, okay, this person has 784 subscribers, so they will go into this category. And so once the nominations are done, which I think runs through August 8th, if I remember right, then there will be voting, and I think we'll be able to see like who falls into which category and then be able to vote from that. So I know I've already received nominations go on the nomination list. He's kind of updated like what channels have been nominated. So that's quite an honor again for doing something like this, just for fun and to keep me sane a little bit. I've enjoyed being a part of the community and made some wonderful friends from this. So I want to, applaud Brian and his behind the scenes committee that kind of works on some of these things. And just, thanks for doing this because, we do a lot of these things for fun without recognition. It takes work to put these videos out and uh, to be a part of the community. And it's, a lot of things you do in life you're not rewarded for, especially like a hobby or something, fun and silly you're doing. But it's nice to get that recognition. But I think one of the biggest things is it does expose you to like, hey, what is everybody else watching? And so you start seeing nominations for things. You're like, I've never heard of that video, that channel. YouTube gets very I don't want to say clicky, but kind of like you're in a subset of a community, kind of. And I've heard like people like when you got started with other channels that are getting started, you kind of conglomerate, around each other, and so it makes it, uh, like little pockets of groups and people. So it kind of can get you exposed to some different content that's out there. So if you're into this comic book content, nominate the people that you really like to watch, and also check the list of who has been nominated, and you know give some views to some of these, subscribe to some of these channels, and yeah, you might find something that you really like and really connect with. So that's awesome. Okay, I've rambled a little bit about CBC awards, but make sure you get those ballots in for nominations. Not ballots, really. Nominations in by August 8th. And then there will be a voting time after that. So, what I wanted to do now is kind of talk of my thoughts about Mike at Chonko's Comics and Nerd Culture did a great video on why Marvel Comics are dying. He had a lot of good points in that. I don't want to rehash a lot of that because you should go check out his video and see his thoughts and process on that. And I will link that exact video down below. And if you're not subscribed to Chonko, please do. And please go also check out Chonko is a big part of the Live show that's on Big Nasty's channel. So make sure that's on Saturday nights. They're bringing in lots of good guests, good conversations, and get to see what some people in the industry are doing. It's been a lot of fun. So make sure you check out channel two to get your extra dose of Chanko during the week. Um, Now, one thing that Mike was bringing up was, you know, there has been a lot of people have said it, and I've heard it many a times, and I hear it so many times at my LCS. So it is kind of common feelings, or at least I do think there's a little bit of the collective mindset of people that kind of jump on a bandwagon a little bit with their thoughts. But there's been a lot of things about, DC is kind of the company to read for comics right now. And Marvel's just, terrible, and they're not worth reading anything. And then there's also with that is like, well, indie comics are doing really well. Image, Boom, and some other companies like that. And so there's been kind of a bashing of Marvel. And I'm not going to disagree with a lot of that. I do think there is some good Marvel books out there. But what I thought I would do is kind of talk a little bit through that and also provide my suggestions on how Marvel could do a little bit better. Um, Marvel doesn't care about what I think. That's, going to be evident. But I think there are some ways that Marvel can improve if it wants to improve, and that's also a big question. So I started, digging a little bit into, uh, and I'm not going to talk a lot about the indie comics because indie comics, while I love reading indie comics. And when I'm talking about indie, I'm talking about anybody that's not DC and Marvel. So I'm including, you know, Image, Boom, Dynamite, IDW, Dark Horse. Or some of the bigger ones. There's Mad Cave and there's Ignition Press is doing amazing things this year. There's a lot of those companies that are out there, and I guess Bad Idea, some of the others. There's a lot of great companies that are out there. They do have a little bit of an impact on the overall market, and their market share. Chanco kind of shows this, like they're growing a little bit, and they're probably digging into Marvel a little bit, but they're not. They're not overtaking and running the market. Like when you go to comic shops, with the exception of a few titles that get really hot for a hot second. A lot of them are, typically, people are picking up like an indie title or two they're interested in generally, but still most of the money is going to DC and Marvel, and that's in terms of sales, that's just what's happening, and has been happening for a long time. So I really wanted to dive into DC versus Marvel since everybody's saying DC owns the sales right now, and it's really true. But I wanted to dig into that data a little bit to kind of talk through it. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to just, share my screen a little bit and kind of, I have this uh, silly little spreadsheet that we'll talk about here. And so let me maximize that. So we got, sorry, this is some information. So what I was doing here, and the first kind of chunk of information that's here is Marvel related, and this bottom chunk is kind of DC related. So what I first did was look at how many I looked at the August solicitations. So the every month DC and Marvel will put and a lot of the companies will be like, hey, here are all the books that we have coming out in our line for August that you can pre-order. And so I looked at that, and what I factored in was any titles, no matter what they are, and then so that includes like facsimiles and things like that that I put in there. And just kind of totaled up how many, and not including the trades and trade paperbacks and hardcovers and those collected editions. I'm not including the books, but I'm including the comics. And so I noticed in the August solicitations for Marvel, they have 58 books that are coming out for August. DC has 53. Now, one thing that I noticed is that I've noticed. I was with my people that are in the LCS, and I was just like, man, there are so many uh, titles that are related to a particular character, and it floods the line. And so Spider-Man related, and what I'm including in the Spider-Man related ones are all the titles that of course have Spider-Man in it. So Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, but I'm also including the like Venom, if there's a Carnage series, some different things like that. Also, like Ultimate Spider-Man and some of those things that would fall into that would go into that. And so, really, the two big like the titles are Spider-Man and X-Men related. And so for X-Men related, it's the Uncanny X-Men, X-Men, but it's also Cable and Deadpool and Bishop and Phoenix and Storm and all of those titles that are Magic, all of those things that are coming out. And I'm calling those X-Men related books. And I know there has been I think there's kind of a hope at Marvel that if you like Spider-Man, you're going to try to pick up all the Spider-Man titles that you can. And there's probably some people that still do that. And X-Men has had a huge following back in the 80s and 90s. And so when they started having multiple titles, and so it was easy when there was just like two or three, but now there's 15 books in August that are coming out that are X-Men character related. So you can't, most people are not going to buy 15 different X-Men titles for a month. If I see people like Eric from SideQuest and Sean from Basement Comics that are huge X-Men fans. They're not buying that many. They're not buying everything. They're using some discretion, so they're picking up a few of them. But if I'm seeing that type of thing, I know that's more common for like big fans not to pick them up. Why are there so many of these titles? So when I looked at it, it was like for Spider-Man related, there's 16, X-Men related, there's 15, other. So there are other books that are not Spider-Man and X-Men related that are in the Marvel line. There's 27 of them, but you're looking at over half of the titles. So 31 of the titles are either Spider-Man or X-Men related, and other. There's a big chunk of the other that I would call Avengers related. So there's the Avengers books. There's also Captain America, Iron Man, some of those different things that fall into that. Um, Other than some of the other titles that uh, like uh, Marvel still has the properties to run comics for Star Wars. They're doing Alien, Predator, even I'd even throw Planet of the Apes into that. Uh, they are doing some titles that are falling into the other, But if you take out the Avengers related and those other properties, there's only like a handful of books that are not into uh, those categories. So a very limited portfolio, I would say, was what there. Now you look at DC. DC has 53 books coming out per August. Uh, 17 of them are Batman related, Superman related, which we would think would be their top two. There are 11 Superman related books, and then they have 25 others. So you got 28 of the 53. So again, over half, probably a little higher over half, um, are either Superman or Batman related. And Batman related, of course, I mean Batman Detective, Absolute Batman, I mean Catwoman, Batwoman, Nightwing, all of those things I would put in Batman related. Superman, you got your action, your Superman, your Adventures of Superman. Also Supergirl, some of those different things I would put into those categories. Um, but interestingly, uh, in the other category, DC also has, a little line of Vertigo books and that goes into their line. And then they do, some completely other books that are not like Avengers, they're not Justice League related. There could be a Legion of Superheroes book. There could be Absolute Martian Manhunter. There's some interesting titles, Dead Man, some of the things, Swamp Thing. There's some different things that don't really fall under a category, but DC is giving them a shot. And there's a lot more diversity in their other category than what you see at Marvel. So I also want to say um, in the line, so Marvel has started with that Ultimate line where they had Ultimate Spider-Man and the Ultimates and Ultimate Wolverine and Ultimate X-Men and all those kind of things. Those have all kind of uh, wound down in terms of how many of those titles are out because they kind of had a set endpoint for that. And those are in that thing that are dwindling down. But there's not really anything ready to take its place, it doesn't seem like. And DC, of course, has their absolute line. And the absolute line is really what is killing it at DC. So I wanted to share that, but then below, what I did was take every year, so 2025 to 2021. I don't have any data for 2022. I could have individually compiled all of that, but that was kind of uh, I kind of used one main source for collecting where they had these annual data of uh, what I was looking at was like top sales of comics. And in 2022, with the collapse of Diamond and everything, there was a lot. There was not a lot of good information that wasn't going to another source, and it had to be compiled monthly to try to see what the top comic sales were. And so, what I thought was interesting was that for the top sales, um, a lot of the books are having like or selling to be on like what I was looking at is the it is really the top 25. Every I think comic that puts this put out wants to be in a top 25 sales list. Um, and so I was looking at what the top 25 titles were, um, for individual sales, individual sales for certain books during that year. And so like Absolute Batman number 10 and Absolute Batman number 11 could also be on that list for top 25 books that have sold through the year. So what I tried to do was look at every year. 2026 is still happening. I'm sure the sales are very similar to 2025 with how things are going. But what I was looking at was out of the 2025, taking that year, Marvel had three books that were in the top 25 for the year. Um, DC had 21. So you're looking um, at 21, 23, 24 of the 25 books that were the top 25 sellers for 2025 were, you know, DC and Marvel, but Marvel only had three of those books, and DC had 21 of those titles. Uh, for for Marvel, one was Spider-Man related, and two were X-Men related. For 2025, 18 of the books were Batman related. I think you're going to find Absolute Batman heavily on that, but also the very first Batman issue. I think Hush might have been on there. Um, and then other that were not Superman. So you might have Absolute Wonder Woman would could be in there. So it's interesting. If you take away the top two, where other things are falling. In 2024, so 2024 is when you actually saw uh, it's kind of at the very end. I mean, at the very start of the absolute line, or right before it started. You see in 2024, you see what books were out. So in 2024, you could say Marvel owned the categories here, and usually going back, it was all Marvel. So 2024, you had 15 of the 25 books for 2024 in the top 25 were Marvel, and you only have eight for DC. The next year, you got 14 in 2023 were Marvel, eight were DC. Go back to 2021, you have 17 that were Marvel high selling books and absolutely none for DC. So DC wasn't putting out anything that people really were clamoring to get, didn't make the top 25 in sales for that whole year. So, I think there's definitely been a shift. Um, if you were, I could show. I'll stop sharing this. You can pause that if you want to take a look at that screen to see that. But I think one thing that you find is that if you take the absolute books out of DC, there's not a lot that's on that list. You will find an issue of Batman would be on there. Um, a couple issues of Batman possibly, but not a lot else that's actually making the list. Also DC All In, there were some like things like that that made the top 25 list, but you don't see a lot of that that's in there. Uh, for Marvel, when they were doing really well in that 2024, 2023, that was when their Ultimate line was starting. So Ultimate Spider-Man, and people were fighting over that, trying to find that first issue of Ultimate Spider-Man, a week off of the stands. It was hard to find because people were interested and wanted to buy it. Um, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Ultimate line versus the Absolute line. The Ultimate line for Marvel, and I read a good chunk of those books that I feel like I can put a little bit of an opinion on it. I think one thing that fell short. Now they did an Ultimate line before, so this is kind of another round of Ultimate comics. Uh, Within that line, um, the one thing that they tried to do was do real time. Um, and they had like Ultimate Spider-Man, if it came out, 1 month before the next book came out, it was supposed to be 1 month later. And that was kind of an interesting premise, but I think it fell short because there was a lot of times where, they have a cliffhanger and somebody's about to fight, and that was it. And then the next month, the fight had already happened. And it was like, oh, here's what happened from that. So there were times that you didn't get to see the stuff that you were there to see. I hate to say it, but for superhero comics, we want to see people fight. That's really what we want to we want to see. We want to see um, uh, you know the Hulk punch the Sentry. We want to see Ultimate Spider-Man versus Ultimate Green Goblin, whatever that might be. We want to see those battles to see what's going to happen, what's going to be interesting from it. Um, but they did a lot of like character development. There was just some weird things. There's times where they're sitting around a table and talking and things like that, and you're like, this is the highlight for this month. I know you're taking like one day from that month, and maybe it is a low day for some people, and that's kind of unique in terms of what you might put into that comic. But man, it made some of them kind of boring. Um, and I will say I probably liked Ultimate Black Panther better than just about anything out of that line. But there was like Ultimate Spider-Man was hit or miss. Like some months would be really good, some months would just kind of drag. And so I think leading up to this, the Maker and this big battle for the whole Ultimate, universe thing, I think a lot of people had dropped off by the time they got around to it, and so it became a lot less interesting. Now they were dragging, and I think maybe even still continuing to drag out the end to this and what's going to happen next, and that kind of stuff. But I don't see people buying it anymore. So I think people they missed an opportunity. I think the time jumps every month. Uh, impacted things, and they had a plan to try to end it in 2 years or do this for 2 years. And but there were some books like that would hit the issue 24 way before another one. There was like another 2 months before the next one. So they kind of messed up their own timeline and couldn't keep up with something that they had promised the reader, I guess. So I think that was a big hurt to Marvel was what they did with their Ultimate line. Let's talk about the Absolute line on the flip side. Um, you know, it has been an interesting phenomenon. I would say it's a phenomenon for DC. If DC didn't have the Absolute line, how many of their books would be in the top 25? Probably not a lot. And there would probably be, while it's shared that there was like Superman related books, there's like 11 Superman related titles. A lot of people aren't buying them. So it kind of surprised me in that and seeing like, okay, they're putting out a lot of Superman books, but if you look at through the years through 2021, you hardly ever find a Superman book that's in the top 25 of sales, and it's only like if they have been a reboot or something like that. So the absolute titles have caught a lot of attention, and I think they have caught a lot of attention with they're bringing in new readers. They really are. I've said this before, but I saw evidence. So I didn't go to Heroes the previous year. I went to Heroes Con this year in June, and the interest in the absolute titles was so evident. It was crazy. So if there was a creator that was involved in anything absolute, Scott Snyder, Nick Dragata, Hayden Sherman, Pornsak Pichachot, we had Stephanie Phillips, like all of these people that were involved, Daniel Warren Johnson that did like Batman Annual. Um, if you saw any of those artists or saw the lines for those people, they were hours for people to do that, and you would see a lot of diversity in ages of people that were in those lines. So you would see people that were, look like they had to be newer readers, and you see old dudes like me that could also be in those lines. And so, what was so interesting, I thought, was the impact of all of those people being in all of those lines for all of that time, kept them from being in other parts of the con. So there were, I I walked right up to Jenny Frison because she didn't have a line. I thought she was on a break or something, but no, everybody that was in the Scott Snyder line or the Daniel Warren Johnson line, she had nobody. So that was crazy to see that, and I wonder how that affected the artists and and writers that were there for their own books. Like, you could walk by and, Joe Staton had nobody in his line. It was kind of crazy stuff when you think about the importance of those creators, or sometimes over a longer time period. And now it's all like absolute everything, absolute everything. Hey, let's remember Absolute Carnage came out before all of that in Marvel. So kind of funny. But I also want to give some props for DC for uh, doing something that I think was important over this last year, and I think some of that is tapping into who is reading comics. So if you look at there was an interesting show I watched, Bronze and Modern Gods, which is I always love watching their show. They were talking about the average age of a comic book reader recently, and nobody has any data to this. Maybe there is some data that can be found to see what the average age of the reader, but I think a lot of the comic companies probably don't want to know, and they stated that. I probably agree with them there. But you do typically see the average reader is a little bit older. And a lot of us that are in the hobby, honestly, a lot of us are in it for nostalgia. We're reconnecting with characters or just comics in general that give us a certain feeling from when we were younger. We're all trying to recapture our younger age in some aspect of things. So I think that if you think about, I would say the average reader is probably upper 30s. It would be my guess, maybe lower 40s sometimes. And so what that means is that if you were a kid and getting into comics, you were probably, for a lot of us, we were 80s and early 90s kind of comic book readers. 90s were huge for the comic book industry with Image coming out. Um, you know, all the image creators that were starting their things. You had, and then the 80s before it, you had, Crisis on Infinite Earths. You had Secret Wars. You had, Dark Phoenix Saga. You had Frank Miller Daredevil. You had Walt Simonson Thor, John Byrne Fantastic Four. You had all these great titles that hit people, and that's what we all are kind of trying to recapture that. One thing that I think I'm going to give props for DC, as I'm getting back to it, is the nostalgia factor. So in the 90s, one of the big things that DC had was Vertigo. And so for people that were getting a little bit older, wanted a little bit of a more mature book, they would get a Vertigo title. That would be the Swamp Thing and Preacher and all of those, the Boys, all that kind of stuff that was out there. People were going for that little bit older, more mature title, and so DC has kind of brought that back. And I see people, and they say it all the time, was like, "Oh, I loved reading Vertigo." So I'm going to give these Vertigo titles a little bit of a shot. And so they'll pick and choose a Vertigo title that's in there. So very smart on them. What is Marvel doing for that? Not really much of anything. I mean, they used to. There was a time where they were trying to do Secret Wars over, and they did a good job with the small Secret Wars series. It was really good. Um, but they're not hitting that nostalgia other than let's put out a whole bunch more Spider-Man and X-Men books. And so they're not doing that. Um, I also think DC gets some props also for how they are tackling um, or, or touching the manga market. So I know DC put out like some manga books and those like manga Batman and manga Joker and some different things like that. I'm not talking about that. What they are doing is, well, I do think some of the artists that they are bringing in there definitely have some high manga influence. You see that with Nick Dragata. You see that with some of the different artists. Even, I mean, Daniel Warren Johnson does a lot of stuff for Image, but doing, being pulled in to do Absolute Batman and stuff like that for the annual, that was pretty big. And that kind of art style connects with some of those younger readers a lot. But one of the biggest things I think DC has done is their compact trade paperbacks that they're doing. They're a little smaller format than a size of a comic book for a trade paperback. They're a little bit smaller, which that's, a lot of the younger generation wanted a smaller manga book they could put in their pocket, put into a backpack easily, took up less space. They like that. But if you look at the manga, uh, the not just the size, but the price is very cheap and is actually like a dollar or two cheaper than most new manga volumes. So you have some younger readers that are coming into the shop. They are seeing that, okay, there's some absolute buzz. They know about it because it's on TikTok. It's on different things. They know about Absolute Batman. They might pick up that title and they're like, well, what else is here? They might pick up another DC title, which is helping DC's sales. They also may pick up one of those smaller trades because they're like, if they're in the manga section and if your shop is smart and they put it somewhat near the manga section, you'll see like, oh, there's a digest size, kind of smaller, and it's cheaper than the manga. Maybe I'll give this a shot. And so I know I see it in my LCS all the time. People are picking those things up off the shelf. Whenever there's a new one, they're picking it up, kind of like manga. And DC was really, really smart in making these accessible and cheap uh, trade versions of some of their hottest books. And so that gets, of course, readers interested. What's next? What's next? What's next? So they're doing a great job with that. Um, I think there are some things, now to get back a little bit, there are some things I think Marvel could do a lot better. And the biggest thing I think, and there's been some shakeup. And I know they have, just hired a new editor in chief. Um, I, I think Marvel did need to shake up things because for their comics thing, I think they do need to shake up things. I don't know if this is the right solution because they're putting a lot of Disney executives and Disney minded conglomerate people or corporate people into these positions. I'm not sure if that's the right solution, but they do need to shake up some things and have some new ideas. They're supposed to be the house of ideas, right? And they currently don't have a whole lot. So, but one of the problems I've seen, and I have heard it from some of the creators that I know that have worked for different, across the industry, uh, is Marvel is not investing in their writers and artists, uh, and nor are they putting the right talent on the right book. What do I mean by that? So I have found that, and it's been happening for a few years now, which I think is helping DC a lot. DC has been investing in artists heavily, so they are getting some of the over the last few years. A lot of the top talents have moved over to DC, or were hired. from the beginning for DC, and but they will also put some of their what they are hoping as their biggest selling books. They're putting their top creators on there. So I know the Absolute. We're going to talk about the Absolute thing again. The Absolute. I know Scott Snyder was really big in kind of forming that, and he was thinking about who could I put. Maybe looking at some new artists that might connect, but also looking at writers that could connect with people. So, bringing over, actually through default, he gave himself the Batman title to write. But you'll see some other, you'll see Charles Soule and some, other people that are involved in in doing some of the bigger titles that are writers, artists also. Nick Dragata, a lot of people didn't know him. I've been following him for a while. I loved East of West, was amazing. Definitely check out that title. Get it in some trades to read through. So it's a masterpiece. But Nick Dragata's art really, when I heard he was announced for Batman, I was like, that could kind of work. I could see him having fun with that. And it does. But even if he does not do the issue, they might have somebody like Jock come in, or Daniel Ward Johnson on the annual. They'll have some big people that they'll sub in. I mean, Werther Dell'Edera, I'm not a fan of his, but he did the latest issue art for Absolute Batman. I, they're bringing in some big guns. They know like, hey, this is our big title. We have to put the best writers and artists on these things. What is Marvel doing? So, Amazing Spider-Man, Joe Kelly is writing, uh, you know, and they've had a rotating amount of artists on that from in the latest volume. There's Pete Woods, who, Patrick Gleason. Oh, yeah, I remember he did some cool ASM Spiderwebby kind of covers. Ed McGuinness, I'll give some props to Ed McGuinness, but they're rotating some of these people around. Uncanny X-Men has Gail Simone, and then they've had David Baldeon, David Marquez, and Luciano Vecchio have been doing like rotating on the art, but they're not like the big names that you want to see. What I also find for Marvel is they will, if they do get a good writer, they will put them on every like so many titles. And so they put like they did it with Cullen Bunn recently, where he was like on like 4 or 5 titles. They do have they've done it with Charles Soule. They've done it with a lot of different writers. Rather than saying, "Hey, do one book, maybe two," they'll put them on the events and like 3 or 4 other titles, and it's just not going to be their best work when you're spread out so thin. It's not going to be your best work. And DC is not doing that. And so they are kind of focusing a little bit more on trying to get the best writers and artists on that. Now, Marvel is investing in their variants, and they are putting cover artists that they know will sell. The J. Scott Campbells, Scotty Youngs, Adam Hughes, even though he's not been doing things because of his illness. They put some of those that they know, like, oh, these variants will sell. We can put these covers up and they'll sell. But they're not making the top 25 lists. A variant is not making the top 25 list. Uh, but one thing that Marvel has done more than DC is the reboots. You will see, I was looking earlier, some of the titles that are out there are most Marvel titles are on usually minimum of volume 6. Uh, for DC, you do get like Batman's on volume 4, which is pretty high. But you don't see a lot of those that are that many volumes. I think Superman's like volume 6 or 7, but you have Black Widow, is on like finished up volume 9. Captain Marvel finished up volume 11. Like that's ridiculous. And I think Marvel, I know from one of the Comics Pro panels that was done for retailers that I fell privy to, the they announced, both DC and Marvel said, "Hey, we'll probably be rebooting a lot more." And they're like, we need to put out more number ones because number ones make that top 25 list. They make, they make the sales, and they're like, we're also going to keep putting out a lot of variants. And so that is going to be even more true for Marvel, I think. I feel like every Marvel book just about that's on thing is a mini or maxi series. You know, you see stuff that's like it's going to run 5 or 6 issues. They won't tell you it's a mini series, but it's over, and then 3 months later, there's another volume of it. And they're doing that more often, and they're counting on some people to pick up the variants because they like the cool cover, and that helps them with their sales a little bit. But they're going that way of let's appeal to the cover draw rather than what's on the inside. And so that's why they're burning out these writers. They're bringing in artists that people don't really know because they don't really care about what's inside the covers. They want that cover to sell, and that's very unfortunate and a slippery slope. I mean, there are collectors definitely that collect for the covers, and I buy variant covers too. I'm guilty of it. I'm trying to be a little more frugal with it, but you throw Doctor Doom on a cover and you see what happens to me. But there are a lot of those decisions that have to be made, and there's a lot of people that are just like, oh, it's a cool cover, and they're spending $5 or $6 on a pretty piece of paper that's going to go into a box and never be seen until you flip through it again. So, and a lot of people are buying it just for the cover and they're never reading the interiors. And Marvel's making some money off of that kind of thing. So it's a slippery slope. I'm very concerned. So I've rambled on a long time about this, and thanks for those that are still still with me here. Um, but anyway, I wanted to give you my thoughts on some different things. Marvel could learn a little bit from DC, and they've started doing some of those like smaller compact things, but they kind of have not done it consistently. They've done a few of them and not really cared about them. But I think one of the bigger things that I think Chonko brought up too was the impact of Disney with from an entertainment standpoint of trying to align their catalog with what is they're doing in other media. So if there's going to be like there's a new Nova movie that has been I mean, it's been announced before, but there's some new interest in it, and they're putting in another writer or director on it. I can't remember, but it sounds like there is a Nova movie coming. You better believe a few months before the Nova movie comes out, there's going to be a Nova series that's going to be out, and people are going to be like, "Oh, I better read that." In case it has any impact on what I'm going to gather from the experience from the movie, or a TV show gets announced, things like that. And that's, but the bad thing that Marvel is doing is, and I've heard other people say this, it's not a original idea for me, but I agree with it, is that Marvel is not really doing a lot of character development. They really haven't been doing that. They have been just trying to be like, okay, let's make like if there's an Avengers movie coming out, our Avengers comics are going to look very similar to what they would see in the theater, in hopes that moviegoers are going to come into the comic shop and try to find a book that's like that. It's not. Honestly, I don't see a lot of that happening, and I'm I spend a lot of time on LCS, and I know what's going on there. Um, I don't see there's a few, and there's some kids that are coming in. They'll be like, "Hey, I really like Avengers the movies. So do you have something like that?" And you can, but you can. suggest that to them. But they are letting the movie industry drive the comics. DC is kind of not doing that. Now, we'll see. There is an Absolute Batman animated that's going to be announced, or it has been announced. Uh, I think it doesn't sound like they are creating something and then letting that come into the comics. Creature Commandos animated series. I didn't see those out in the comics, but Marvel has done that. I mean, uh, with the announcement of Doctor Doom and Avengers Doomsday coming out, it's hit my wallet hard. How many Doctor Doom things are out there in Marvel? There's a ton. Just to keep interest in the character to hopefully like they're hoping like, hey, that's going to help us drive movie sales and things like that. I don't know if that's I don't know if there's proper market research for any of that. Um, but I I think they are having their line mimic what's out in their media a lot more than what DC is. Now, I do think Marvel has put out a lot more movies and a lot more TV shows and a lot more of those kind of things than DC has, definitely. And that's probably part of it. If DC had that many movies, I bet there'd be some more comics that would be out there. It just seems natural. But I do think Marvel's been victim to that. I saw a comment like from Jason Archivist Adrift that said on Chanko's videos, like, hey, there hasn't been much Marvel character development in the 80s, since the 80s. I don't know if I fully agree with that, but there has been less impactful character development. I would definitely agree with that statement where Marvel's doing books. There's not many stakes. Nobody's going to die. Nobody's going to have some totally catastrophic happen in their life. Those kind of things have not been happening lately, and that's the kind of cool stuff that you want to read. I will say there are some good Marvel books out there, um, but they're not Spider-Man and X-Men related. So I think the best Marvel books out right now. I mean, I'm a Fantastic Four fan, but they're books you can just pick one off the shelf. It's a great story. It's entertaining. Um, Fantastic Four has been great. Captain America has been great. Iron Man, at least I haven't read the last couple, but Iron Man had a really great solid start. Daredevil had a really great solid start. Punisher had a really great solid start. Those on their new volumes and all those kind of things as they keep revoluming for everything. Those have been some really great titles. Uh, Daredevil, Cold Day in Hell. A lot of people love that book. Last year going into the beginning of this year, and it took risks. It was a different type of book, and it rang true with a lot of readers. And that was they put some good talent. Charles Soule, Steve McNiven were parts of that. They did some great things with those types of books that they'll take risks on. And if you think about Absolute Universe is all a risk. It's all risky DC stuff. Vertigo is all risky DC stuff. And it's doing well. So Marvel, take some risks for the love of God. Let's have some interesting stories that aren't scared to break continuity or to upset people that are into the movies. Like, let's let the comics drive the movies. That's why they were there. I think Marvel's not getting any money for the back issues, so they want to put out another Avengers title or a new Spider-Man title because there's a new Spider-Man movie, so they get that money rather than tell people, oh, go back and read these titles that you can find on a little compact version. It doesn't cost a lot of money. Yeah, DC's doing some great stuff with all that. So anyway, there's my rant. There's my thoughts and opinions. Let me know what you think. Before I go on any further, take it a little bit of breath. I'm gonna take a sip of my tea, like basement. Sean, just to clear my throat. So, what you may have been here for is to see all these books. You're like, shut up about all this Marvel DC stuff. I don't care. And maybe you don't. Maybe you don't read books. So now let's show some old books. So from that swipe left if you love them app. Um, uh, I did find some great deals from somebody. And I showed these last night on Nate's uh, channel, Show and Tell. But I did get Marvel Premiere number 31. This is Wood God. Look at that dude's mullet, I think, that's coming over there, and his um, furry hooved legs. Wood God. Can't wait to read this. Marvel Premiere took some risks on things, and they were fun. And so, but Nate had gotten that recently, and when I saw it was like these were like a buck. I was like, I'm going for it. Also got Monarch Star Stalker. This is Marvel Premiere 32. I wanted to look at this because I had not. I know they put there was somebody that was big that was involved in this. Um, let's see if I can get to the title page. Yeah, Howard Shakin did the um, did the art and the story. So, kind of took a risk and did something. Now, I don't think anybody cares about Monarch Stark's Star Stalker. Um, but, this is like the 70s. Hey, man, it's kind of Star Warsy looking. Let's make a comic about it. All right, cool. Also picked up super cheap, Incredible Hulk. This is the king size special or annual number two. This does a lot of reprints of the leader things. I think it's got an original story in it too, but Herb Trimpe cover. His Hulk's a little kind of weird sometimes for me, but um, I was excited to get that for cheap. And then I got this one. This is a Amazing Spider-Man 221, and this has hit like recently one of the like top 50 spikes in sales or top 25 because you got Spider-Man jumping over a character that's running into the wall. And this was, I guess they mentioned that this cover was they wanted to kind of recreate it in the new Amazing Spider-Man Brand New Day, like to kind of recreate that motion. Um, so this book is kind of spiked and it was like $1. So that's cool. I got this one because it's just kind of funny to me, but it's like the death of Aquaman. Aquaman is dead and it's all our fault. And Batman's like, we never even knew who he really was. So just that comment kind of cracked me up. But Justice League, thought I'd give it a try. Now this was a weird one that I was like, I don't know what the heck is going on with this book, but I got to try it out. Adventure Comics, it's all that Superboy, Legion of Superheroes stuff. Um, and it is the first appearance of three different characters. It's got a Beast Boy, so it's not like the Teen Titans Beast Boy, but it's got this guy who wears his tidy whities outside of his red unitard. Beast Boy, we got Evolvo Lad and Gas Girl. Gas Girl, when I saw Gas Girl, I was like, oh man, I gotta see what's up with Gas Girl. So I was like, that's stupid. I did pick this one up, Adventure Comics, because it's Neil Adams, and I also like it's like um, women, women chucking men, like throwing Superboy, Supergirl's throwing Superboy. She's like, "Get lost, Superboy," and then it's all these women in the back, like, "Yeah," So it's kind of like a female empowerment probably issue, which I kind of dig that stuff. So want to watch that, read through that. Then I got two Lois Lanes. I got this one with Lois Lane getting ready to crush Superman with a big, giant ball of kryptonite. Um, and then this one here, which the cover was just great, but uh, it's Lois Lane marrying a she's turned into a demon and she's supposed to be marrying Satan there. And she's got like little hooves and little, devil's tail and things like that. So I'm really, really curious to see what this just looks absurd. So I gotta check that out. Uh, Another recent, just a random eBay buy, but I found this for like so cheap, like $10. Uh, what if number 10? And this first time I read it because I got when I first started reading comics, I got into What If really early on, but it was issue 34 was my first one. So this was like 2 years before that, and the this was a good story. I enjoyed it. Female Thor, Jane Foster becoming Thor, who calls herself Thordis in this book, of course, spiked because of the Marvel universe and the MCU movies that came out with Jane Foster actually, and picking up the hammer later and Mighty Thor and some of the comic continuity. This book has spiked a lot, and I think still. I mean, I know I got a great deal on this, but yeah, I kind of wanted to read this, and I'm glad I did. So that was a lot of fun. Now, I also got from a a, s- a seller um, a whole bunch of Captain Britain Volume Two. So I'm kind of becoming a big Anglophile with comics, but I've always loved Captain Britain, and I remember getting I no longer have it, but I had a Captain Britain #1 of this Volume 2 series. And I really liked Captain Britain when I was introduced to that. I loved Excalibur. Those were great titles, that came out. Um, and so, and I also recently read the Captain Britain omnibus, which is like so thick, man. It is like one of the biggest omnibuses that are out there. And there were so many great people that were involved in these Captain Britain things. Of course, Alan Davis and Mark Farmer, but you have Alan Moore did some writing of some Captain Britain and things like that. So it had some good stuff that was in it. But this was a little run that was kind of towards the end of the run. So I got #7 here, #8, #9. And the cool covers. I'm excited to read these out. #10. Oh, I love the back. It's got a little ad for the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game, which I definitely picked that up and played a million times. Um, #11, which does have, it says it had a free Captain Britain poster. It's in there. I'm not pulling it out to open it up. I'm going to keep it in there. So, #12. #13, which is kind of Megan, I think, becoming Captain Britain there, which is pretty cool. And then the last issue is #14. And so now I have numbers 7 through 14, so 8 issues of that. So I might try and get the first six just to finish that volume and have it all collected there. So I was really excited to get those. Got them for a great deal because especially some of those have some key significance into it and can get pricey. But I think I spent about $5 a copy there, and there was no difference in the prices there. So it was just kind of a lot that I got there. Um, Now, one of the biggest books I've gotten this year, definitely. Um, so the owner of my LCS, I know I helped them out quite a bit with doing some pricing of books and help them out for some of their big events and things like that. And so he had invited me to come on a Tuesday night to go see. He's like, "Hey, there's these people that we know that do shop in the store. They've kind of opened up a little side business comic place. They had it in one of their houses for a while, but they decided to move it to I guess one of them is an auto mechanic, and they have like a back room, and they're selling comics out of there." And so he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go down to this auto mechanic shop and go dig through what comics they have." And he invited me, but it was on a Tuesday night, which is when I'm on Holly's channel. So I was like, "I can't on Tuesday. I'm sorry." And he's like, "No problem." But so right before Nate's show start, I get I'm getting texts of like, "Hey, do you want this? Do you see this? Look at this. This is cool." Um, and so he had sent me a text and said, "Hey, look at this?" And I was like, "Whoa!" And it was a you know a fairly cheap price on it, but it's been a big book that I've been after. Um, but it is coverless. So it is Marvel Spotlight #5, the first appearance of Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze, and it's coverless. But he picked it up for me, and he was like, "Do you want this?" And I was like, "I do," because the price was so good on it. But I was like, "I do," but I was like, I got money's a little tight right now. I knew the next day I had like 15 books to pick up from the LCS. So I was like, I could get it and pay you back, like in a couple of weeks or something like that if that would work. And he's like, well, tell you what, if you come in and just help price out some books for me, I'm not worried about it. It's free. So he gave me this Marvel Spotlight #5, first appearance of Ghost Rider. Uh, Man, I am so thrilled by this. So stoked. And I do have a reproduction cover on the way, so that can go um, around this to kind of make it look, cool. It's going to look much better than what's on the inside. The pages are brown, but it's all there. Not in terrible shape other than the coloration of the book. But I am over the moon about this because I've been really getting into Ghost Rider Johnny Blaze lately. And so I didn't know if I'd be able to get a Marvel Spotlight 5 anytime soon. And so it was like, whoa, that's huge. So thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. Um, and then, so the last thing I'm going to show here is I have a new little honey hole that I get some books from. And I'm trying to find if I have this one in here. Yeah. Um, and so they have some books there, great bronze and silver age stuff, which I don't see a lot of that around in my area. But they have it's like a booth at an antique shop, and they're rotating and putting a lot of things out there pretty often. But they put up a picture, and the picture just said, 50% off everything here. And I'm like, what? Because the prices are already like probably too cheap for what they put out there. And then I'm like, 50% off. Oh yeah, we could do some damage here. So, so I went up there, and this is what I picked up, and I could share some of the prices, but I did get this issue of Eternals. So I think I've been not really actively going after it, but I think I only need like 2 or 3 issues left of the first volume of Eternals, and this is #7, which is like first Eson there, but $1 is what So Eternals, yeah, got that. And this kind of intrigued me, but I got a little chunk of Ghosts, DC's Ghost books, and I picked up just some of them that were interesting to me. But I got this #6. Check out that cover, and it says $5, so it was like $2.50. So that was great. I tried to pick up some of the earlier ones because I thought they might, go. There was one I passed that was like a little bit too beat up, but I got #8 here, The Thing and the Clock. So these, I haven't read a lot of Ghosts, so I'm excited to read these. I thought this cover was just so cool. It's kind of like, a knight. This is Corpse Knight, right? You can't fool me, darling. I know you're hiding in that armor. Well, she's gonna have a surprise. Uh, but yeah, I was excited about this one. $1.50. I got this one. It was funny. Paul, Mr. McGroovy. Um, I sent him a picture of this because I was like, "Do you have this? I don't know if you have this, but I feel like I've seen it recently somewhere." And he was like, "No, that's an amazing cover." He's been collecting the doo doo train covers. And so I sent him this, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, that's an amazing cover." And I was like, he's like, "Oh my gosh, it's $3." And he's like, "If that's $3, I need to move to Virginia." And I was like, "Well, it's 50% off. It's only $1.50." But so I picked this up for him. So I'm going to start working on a little stack that I can send to Paul. Just one of those amazing people and great train cover. So excited to pick that up for Paul. I also picked up, I'm going to get this one out of the bag just because the bag is so, they didn't change their bags very often. But this is a John Carter Warlord of Mars, number 11. This is a Marv Wolfman, Dave Cockrum did a lot of this John Carter stuff. This is the origin of Deja Thoris, who's the hot chick in John Carter. And so this is like the besides the number one is probably like the book that's worth a little bit. And so I paid $2 for that. So all day. Another thing that I am working on is a champions run. Stupid, but it's got a lot of weird random characters: Angel, Black Widow, Hercules, Ghost Rider, and so I've been getting Iceman also. So there's a few issues I need. So this is number 5, and then I got number 10, Ghost Rider shooting Hercules in the back. And number 13, this is in super nice shape. They had it, it was $9, it was like 450. So I was like, I'll pick these up. But now I'm only like 3 or 4 away from finishing that Champions run. I picked this just kind of out on a whim. Was they had a Fun and Games magazine. And so I was like, I'll pick that up. $2.50. I don't know if they're all the puzzles are done in there or not. Also got this Luke Cage Hero for Hire, which is number 14, which is the first appearance of this Big Ben guy. So I've been intrigued. I just heard Rich from Big Nasty say I'm kind of getting all the Luke Cage ones before it became Power Man and Iron Fist, and I've slowly been picking up a few of them if I could find them for cheap. So I got that. Howard the Duck. This is the Howard the Duck as Son of Satan. This is number 14. I picked that one up, for $1.50. Um, and always curious about that. I'm starting to collect a lot of Howard the Duck, getting it over time. Now, this is a series. I have not read a single book of this. It's a Jack Kirby creation, but it's Commandi, the last boy on Earth, or Commandi. I don't know how that's pronounced. But this was number 4 for $1.50. There's always these like crazy creature kind of things that are going after him. Um, so I, I'm meet Tough Tan, Prince of Tigers, Master of Men. So I'm curious about that one. I'll give Commandi a little bit of a try. And then this was a weird one that I was just like, okay, this is a 10-cent DC book uh, from I think 1961. Um, it's Tales of the Unexpected number 66. I just thought the cover was kind of crazy. So, uh, yeah, I was like, I'll pick up a 10-cent DC thing, and this was $2.50. I'll do that. I'll do a 1960 book for $2.50. And I'll also pick up this book, which is a Go-Go Checks DC book. And the cover just cracked me up that I was just like, oh my God, I don't know what this is. But it's Superboy, 127. And we got this is the first appearance of B-Boy, I think, maybe. But it's like Lana became the insect queen, and there's B-Boy. I don't know what this is about. The dude looks totally weird, but I was like, I'm gonna get it, $2.50. No problem. And then I picked up a couple things. Another series I'm debating about trying to collect um, is Phantom Stranger. Uh, I've loved the covers. I've read a couple of issues that I really am intrigued by the character. So I might get into Phantom Stranger a little bit. So I got number 19, just a great cover there. And then number 27. And so I did pick up a couple of Phantom Strangers. So I'm excited to check that out. Then I got a couple of magazines. This one is not that old. It's just from 2024, but it's Comic Book Creator, which really does a deep dive on a particular writer or artist in comics. And this was Denny O'Neil. And so these, when they come out, yeah, they're $11. And so this one was marked at 5, so I got it for 250. But I want to read more about Denny O'Neil. Got luckily the chance to meet him, get a few books signed that he worked on with Neil Adams back in the day from some Batman books. So very cool. And then I mentioned I just recently got a the first appearance of Shang-Chi from Special Marvel Edition number 15, I think it is. And I was looking at the reading order of that, and so I have a whole Master Kung Fu run, uh, and now I have this two Special Marvel editions that go into that. I'm going to get ready to do a big Master Kung Fu run read. So now that I have everything in there, but then I also noticed I was like, oh, I don't have any of the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu magazines. So I was going through, and they had a couple of issues there that I decided to, you know, decided to pick up because they have, Shang-Chi stories in it. But I did get Heads of Kung Fu. Now, this is a great, like, Neil Adams cover, but this is number 3. It's got Jim Kelly, if you remember from Enter the Dragon. It's got Jim Kelly kind of featured on there too, so that's cool. So in addition to Shang-Chi, they had a lot of Bruce Lee stuff, and this is one here that I got. Uh, Bruce Lee Greater Than Ever in Return of the Dragon. So it's kind of cool. Bruce Lee, just the man. Love him. It had a little mark like, hey, there's a crunch that was put on tape. So this was like $3.50. So that was great. So I'm sorry this video is eternal. I know you have better things to do than watch like an hour long video from me, but hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much. If you made it this far, man, give yourself an applause or check yourself into an insane asylum. I'm not sure which, but thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for everybody's support through this last year and a half of doing this YouTube thing. I've had some challenging years since joining this, and even before joining this. But being around the community and getting to know people and getting to talk with people like yourself that might be watching this, it really does mean a lot to me, and it really gives some meaning in my life that I wouldn't have otherwise. So I really appreciate that. Appreciate all of you. I hope you and your family are doing well. Make sure the people that are in your life that you care about, make sure that they know that. Um, and make sure you flip through a floppy. But take care, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well in your own personal circle of life. And I will catch you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.